The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host.
And our author, TV personality, and world-renowned mule trainer, Meredith Hodges of the Lucky 3 Ranch. We are back on. Meredith and I are going to talk about train for the pleasure of it and train your own mule. Meredith, when I was a kid, if you wanted to ride something, you just had to go down to the corral and get something out, whether it was broke or not, and then you had to start riding it. So that was my childhood.
That's pretty much the way it went, too.
Yeah, so let's talk about this.
Okay. Well, we humans, we thought that's the way it was, just like you described. These are wild animals, and you expect them to be disobedient. You expect trouble, and you expect to fall off.
Right.
You know? And that came with the territory. And so it wasn't inordinate that people would, from that kind of a description, decide, well, I'm not good enough to train this animal, so I have to have a trainer if it's a hard animal. If it just lets me ride it, that's fine. But if it doesn't, then I better send it to a trainer, because I'll never be able to do all of that with the animal to make them calm enough to ride, and I don't want to get hurt. And then you go down that road, and what that does is it just cultivates a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And when you get fearful, so does the animal.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a ripple effect, and it just gets worse, because what you end up doing is cultivating resistant behaviors in the animal that scare you and scare them, and you go down a road where you're both being kind of resistant towards each other, and that doesn't really get you anywhere. And then I've found that with equines in general, and especially with mules and donkeys, they bond heavily to the people who trained them.
Right.
That's where they learn trust. And when I say bond, I don't mean snuggle up to you. A lot of people think that's bonding by itself, but it really isn't. Building the trust is real bonding.
Yeah.
If they're fearful about anything, they should be able to trust your judgment. And if they do, then they will cease and desist on the bolting and running thing, which is very common with mules.
Mm-hmm.
You got to realize that they're only bolting and running because they think you're full of BS, and I'm not going to do what you say because I don't trust you. You know? At least that's what I've gotten from it. And they don't care if you weigh 90 pounds or 200 pounds. If they don't trust you, they're going to bolt and run, and they're going to be successful in getting that lead rope out of your hand or running off with you. And if you get to having a little bit too much leverage in your riding, they'll just get rid of you. It's really kind of funny because in the course of Bishop Mule Days, we've had a lot of classes out there that PETA and a lot of groups think are very abusive to the animals, you know, because we're doing all kinds of spooky things. Like we've got a costume class, and they lit an outhouse on fire in the middle of the arena, and the animals are walking around and everything. But one of the other costumes is this string of mules hauled in the outhouse and set it in the middle of the arena, and then in comes some more string of mules with a water pump on them, and they put the fire out. And then there were people in these costumes that were really loud and raucous. People saw that and they go, oh my God, you know, you're just scaring all these animals. Meanwhile, you know, I didn't enter that class. I'm sitting by the fence on one of my animals, had another one right next to me. They came by the fence and everything with all this chaos going on, and my animals just kind of looked at it. My mules looked at it. But that's because they learned to trust my judgment. Now, if they didn't trust me, they would have bolted away from the fence and as far away from that chaos as they could have got. Yeah. And that's what I have found is the usual thing for a mule or donkey to do. And they're strong enough to get rid of you, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Whether you're on the end of a lead rope or sitting on their back or even driving from a carriage, if they decide they don't like what you're doing and they don't trust you, they'll run off. And it gets really dangerous when they're hitched to a cart or a carriage and they don't trust you because you haven't taken enough time with the groundwork to really work it out with them. And that does take time. That's why our kids go to school for basic foundational training for 12 years. And yet we want to get this stuff done in 30, 60, 90 days. You can't build a relationship like that. That's exactly how we humans tend to complicate our lives. And we fill them with people, things, goals, and tasks until we're too busy to even think about what we're doing. And that is very disturbing to an equine.
Sure.
And for a mule or donkey and other equines too, it's different. The equine has no to-do list. No ought to have this or ought to do that. He takes things as they come. He considers his response in the moment, and he stays open to possibility. So this year, why not resolve to be more like your mule or donkey? Consider your priorities and look at your relationship with him from his perspective. In other words, stop to smell the roses, and during those inevitable, challenging moments, put yourself in your long-eared shoes. Try to think like he does, and you might be surprised at the response that you get. This is going to take a lot of patience. You're going to have to slow things down. You're going to have to break things down into little steps. You're going to have to set your goals a lot lower and appreciate the little victories that you're going to have along the way. After all, we humans tend to begin with the end in mind, and the process is just a means to that end. Training, for example, is a process. We attempt to train with a goal in mind. Our goal at the Lucky Tree Ranch is just simply to improve the equine's performance as well as our own. Most of us train with the expectation that improvement will occur, and most of us add the self-imposed pressure to improve within a finite amount of time. That's a mistake. The notion that training all by itself could be a goal is foreign to many of us, but consider it. What if we train for the pure pleasure of spending time with our equines while using the values we hold dear, like respect, kindness, consideration, and consistency in our behavior? How different would this experience be for us and for our equine if we keep those things in mind while we're training and not necessarily the expectations of what we want to achieve? Today's modern horse training techniques don't generally work well with mules and donkeys anyway. Most horse training techniques that are popular will speed up the training process so that people can ride sooner. They can go trail riding with their friends sooner. It makes the trainer's techniques look more attractive, but these techniques don't adequately prepare the equine physically in a good, balanced posture for the added stress of having a rider on board. Long-ears have a strong sense of self-preservation, and they really need the kind of work that builds their bodies properly so that they feel good in their new and correct posture. And you need to know what that is. People talk about a rough-gaited animal, for instance, and some animals are rough-gaited, some animals are not. Well, some people walk properly in good posture, and others do not. And the ones that don't walk in good posture invariably have problems later on as they age. They will get humpbacks right behind their neck. They'll get knee problems, hip problems, all kinds of problems with their bodies by not being in good posture while they're moving. So you don't get the kind of results that you expect with your equine if you don't pay attention to their good posture and developing the strength in that good posture at the deepest level around the bones so that they can sustain any kind of pressure that we're putting on them. Forming a good relationship with your equine begins with a consistent maintenance routine and appropriate groundwork. Most equines don't get the well-structured and extended groundwork training on the lead rope that paves the way to good balance, core muscle conditioning, and a willing attitude. This is essential if he's truly expected to be physically and mentally prepared for future equine activities. And with long ears, this is critically important. And this also has a lot to do with how they're maintained, even when you just throw them out in their corral with a shelter. They should have a shelter, because if they don't have adequate housing, then they're going to start developing vices. If you got too much wood around them, for instance, when they see other animals that are out and about, they're going to want to be out there with them. So then they're going to try the fence. And if they can't get out the fence, they're going to try to eat it. And then the next thing you've got is an animal that is cribbing, and that cribbing is coming from anxiety.
Yeah.
Because they're not comfortable where they are. When you have a regular maintenance routine and you get out there maybe 2-3 times a week to see them, then they know that you're going to be out there. They know that they're going to be doing things with you. If you make it pleasant for them and they start feeling good in their bodies when they're with you, then they're going to want to be with you. And more than that, if you're doing the right kinds of things, they're going to appreciate the rest time as well in their own pen. A lot of people will, if they take exception to obstacles, for instance, or they don't want to leave the barn, they call it barn sour, and they call the animal barn sour, when that's really not the case. The case is, you're not making it fun for this animal to go away from the barn. They're not enjoying their time with you, and so they decide to just go back and hide with their friends. And that's what they want to do, and that's what you're dealing with. But if you make it pleasant for them when they're with you by paying attention to the right kinds of things, number one being the development of their body while they're with you, and don't just get on and ride right away. Just because you bought an animal that's broke or an animal that's been with a trainer doesn't mean that they've been trained adequately to develop the core muscles that sustain them in good posture. So when you start doing things with them, you can be doing things that actually hurt their bodies. They won't appreciate that. Right. And that will create resistance and distrust in the relationship. No matter how old or how well trained this animal is, they still need time to do the simplest things to get to know you before they're going to learn to have trust and confidence in you. This is why the exercises that you do with them should be structured to build the body slowly, sequentially, and in good equine posture. No human or equine is born in good posture. It's something that needs to be taught and practiced repetitively if it is to become a natural way of moving and moving in the body. These things don't just happen. You have to structure them. You have to practice them. It's just like anything else that's new to you. You might be really awkward doing things in the beginning, but as you do it more and repeat it and practice it, it gets easier, takes less time to do it. And this is the attitude that you have to have towards groundwork, that, yeah, you might have to put in as much as 2 years of groundwork, not 30, 60, 90 days and then ride, because it takes a long time to develop a body properly. There's a lot of elements in the body that need attention, but they don't need to be stressed or fatigued. When the body is in good posture, then all the internal organs can function properly, and the skeletal frame will be supported correctly. So when you do things, it won't be hard for your equine to do them. Just as our children need routine, ongoing learning, and the right kind of exercise to grow up into healthy and happy adults, so do equines. They need clearly set boundaries to their behaviors in order to minimize anxiety and depression in their attitude. And when you throw a whole lot of stuff at them, at once just so you can ride, they get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And that actually creates anxiety and depression. And you need to know that. So you don't want to go fast with them learning these things. You want to do things with them that they can do easily, and things that will build their strength and coordination in good posture. The time spent together during specified leading exercises in the hourglass pattern, for instance, and in the round pen will build a solid relationship with your equine, foster his confidence and his trust in you because you make him feel better than he ever has. Carefully planned routine and an appropriate feeding program is critical to healthy development. But if you go through this stuff too fast, it's very easy for the equine to become overwhelmed, anxious, and even depressed about what's going on. If you just throw the hay and his feed to him once in the morning and once at night, or if it's erratic and not fed at specific times, you know how your dogs and cats will, if you have them, will let you know when it's time to eat, and they bother you until you feed them. Well, an equine stuck out in a pasture or in a pen or in a stall or whatever can't come in and nudge you in the shoulder and say, hey, it's feeding time.
Right.
But what they can do is stand out there and holler. You know, and a lot of people, instead of realizing that they're just trying to remind you to get on a schedule and a routine here, you think they're just being noisy. And then have people that contact me and say, well, how can I get my animal to quit braying at me or quit neighing at me and quit pounding on the fence or eating the fence and doing all these things? I tell them, well, maybe you might try feeding at the same time every day. And feeding at least once in the morning and once in the late afternoon. And that affords them a reasonable amount of time in between meals so that they can actually predict when you're going to feed them. And they can tell, just like your dogs and cats, when you're supposed to be doing it. And if you're not, then they don't trust you. Then they think you need to be reminded, and then they make themselves anxious, so they become demanding. And that is a resistant behavior that you're going to run into if you try to train them. They're going to go, I can't trust this person to feed me. How can I trust this person when all they want to do is ride me? But it is true that these equines, and particularly long ears, bond to the person that trains them.
Sure.
And a lot of people's answer to the solution to the problem is going to be, oh, well, I'll just send them away to a trainer so they won't buck me off when I get on them. When you do this, because they bond to the person who trains them, now they're back with you again, and you've been inconsistent. That's why you sent them to the trainer. And when they return home, they can become resentful and resistant. And I ask people, I say, can you honestly expect someone else to go out and make a friend for you? Because that's what you're asking them to do when you send them away to a trainer. This relationship with your animal needs to be uniquely yours. You need to be the one that's responsible for your own relationships, even with your equine. And when you do that and you take that responsibility, then you begin to recognize all the little details there are that you need to pay attention to even just build a relationship. And that's what my whole program is built around. And this is why I give away all this information for free on my website, is because I know there's a lot of details, and I know that people need to know them if they're even going to get their animal back from a trainer and continue forward. First of all, they need to go, as we talked about before last week. If they have their animal in training, they need to be there and find out just exactly what that trainer is doing with your animal and learn how to be consistent with the same kind of approach. Now, you may decide that some of the trainer's approaches can be better than what they're doing, and so when you get your animal home, you may want to make those adjustments to the training program. But in doing so, you still need to be consistent about how you're doing it and do it in a routine manner so that your animal knows what to expect. Now, I have embraced this approach to training a long time ago with successful results. This painstaking process that I discovered involved a fair amount of trial and error. And I determined that my ambitions as a competitor made no impression on my equines whatsoever. Rather, it was the level of respect, the level of compassion and empathy that I brought to the relationship with my long-hairs that served us best, both in and out of the show ring. And that's why I also say that it doesn't matter what you're going to do with your equine, the approach still needs to be the same. You have to keep their welfare foremost in mind, and that means building their bodies so that they can do what you're asking. My animals will do anything for me now because it's not because I had these lofty goals. It's because we truly enjoy being with each other regardless of what we're working on or what we're doing. And that is due to the fact that I finally wised up and realized that they had to be in good shape to do anything I was asking them to do. And then our close relationship became a result of keeping that in mind. And mine are very unselfish relationships with my equine and others. The friendships that I have built with my long-ears are integral to their outstanding performance and versatility during their physical training. In all of my books and videos, I explain how to build that kind of relationship as you develop your equine's foundational training. Just as he learns to move in a balanced frame day by day, moment to moment, your equine will also deepen his trust in you so you can take pleasure in your mutual effort. In fact, training for the pure pleasure of it is what your mule and donkey does naturally. He's not thinking about the next show or the next trail ride or the next task or how much better he should be. He's not even pondering what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. He's just out there with you in the moment, experiencing with you good and bad, period. In that respect, he's not so different from his ancestors that spent their days roaming, grazing, drinking, and resting. Why not assume a degree of responsibility and set realistic goals that are easy to achieve and that don't put your relationship at risk? We love our animals, but sometimes we forget to enjoy them and respect them. My ultimate goal is to continue to learn from them. This can be a lifelong pursuit with never a boring moment. Let them be who they are and give them the care they so richly deserve. That way, we both win. Now, in order to really take the responsibility of training your own mule, you need to know how to set yourself up for success. You don't want to just say, okay, well, I got a corral and a pen and I'll clean it once a week and I'll use this rope halter that has leverage and kind of force some things, you know, and if they get on the fence, I'll put an electric wire there, adding to a wire fence that may be sagging, adding to a wooden top rail that might be a really good place to crib. You got to think of things in terms of their comfort. We've talked a little bit about developing their postural comfort, if you will, and their muscular development in good posture, their core strength and strengthening that. But there are other things that we use in the course of training that we need to not only think about how comfortable they are, we tend to think about how much leverage we're going to get from it, or what aesthetically it's going to look pretty on the animal. We choose our bridles, for instance, our Western bridles with silver on it, and Western bridles don't have any nose bands on them, per se, and the senior bridles do not. The training bridles might have a nose band, but they don't have a drop nose band on them. Only an English bridle has that. But think about, if we're talking about halters and bridles and things that go on their head, they need to fit comfortably. And they need to elicit something that can be a cue to the animal, but won't force the animal. So one of the first things I did, one of the very first things I did was feeding them feeds that are not going to hype them up. And the crimped oats mix that I recommend, which you can find on my website in the training tips or under training. In the training tips or Ask Meredith about nutrition, and it'll tell you how to feed them so that they don't start being anxious from the feed, and then how to go ahead and put them in pens and runs. And don't confine a long ears to a stall. Actually, you probably shouldn't confine any equine to only a stall.
Right.
They go to trainers that do that, and these animals end up eating their way out of the stalls. They're just cribbing on the wood and everything. And, of course, the trainer wants a really pretty facility, and the wooden facilities are structured such that they're very attractive, but they're not very practical. I find that the Portastall all-steel barns are quite practical. And when you have a mule that is very smart, which most of them are, and intelligent, then you need to think about the stall doors that you have. If you've got an open window at the top of the door, that's an invitation for a mule to jump out.
Oh, sure.
So, and not only that, if they don't feel like jumping out, they'll put their head over the door and fiddle with that latch until they learn how it works, and then they'll just open the door. And they do that on gates, too, and that's why we fit all of our gates with chains and carabiner snaps.
Right.
You can't just put any kind of snap on those chains either, because these guys are very, very clever, and they will find their way out. And so when I was deciding what kind of barn, I knew I had to get an all-steel barn. I figured that out pretty quick. But it took me a while to figure out that I did need not only bars above the doors. I didn't want to put solid doors above the doors, because then they would feel claustrophobic and they'd be banging on that metal and denting up the walls and everything else.
Yeah.
Because they would feel like they were they're claustrophobic. They don't like being confined like that.
Right.
And if they can't see that their friends are in there, or that they have a friend, then it can get pretty radical. I did put bars above the doors, the stall doors, but when I had solid walls between the animals, they still felt claustrophobic, and they felt like they were in jail. They could look through the bars and they could see each other across the alleyway, but they couldn't really talk to each other.
Yeah.
So when we remodeled the barn, we decided to put dividers between the stalls with those same bars on them, every 2 stalls, so that each animal had a neighbor that they could talk to. That greatly reduced the banging and the damage they were doing to their hooves by banging on the walls. And that's another thing, that when they can bang on the walls in their stalls, then they can carry that into the workstation or into the arena. If you're working several animals and you have to tie one up to the side, then they will paw a hole right there in the ground next to the fence. If you go to a show and you tie them to the trailer because you don't want to rent stalls or anything there, and they allow you to do that, they will dig to China. CG was a big digger. She's the one that taught me about most of this stuff that I'm telling you about right now, and kept me guessing about what I had to do to lower her anxiety. And I took her to a show one time, and I had several animals at the show, and she was just a 2-year-old at the time, so she didn't have all the riding classes. She only had halter classes, and there was only like 2 of them that she could go into. So I had to leave her tied at the trailer without her buddies. And when I returned to that trailer, she was standing in a hole looking straight at the wheel of the trailer.
Wow.
The pit was so deep that she dug. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So I knew that I had to break this digging habit. And so it got me to thinking about all these other things. All I could think of is, well, they've told me mules and donkeys are wonderful animals. They're strong, they're intelligent, and what a great sense of humor they have. If you don't have a sense of humor, getting her out of a pit like that was a challenge, but since we had a pretty good relationship, she jumped out fairly easily. And she was about 14 hands, so, you know, the pit was deep, but not so deep that she couldn't jump out. But it looked pretty crazy with her being eye to the trailer tire, and that presented a challenge for me. I had to stop and think about it. If you think about your mule being more like a 6-year-old child, that requires love and patience and understanding and a good reward system to grow into a happy, healthy, independent, reliable, and well-adjusted adult, you will realize that negative reinforcement needs to be kept to a minimum and just define the behavioral limits and try to do it with a good sense of humor and a relaxing attitude. And that will result in an animal that is relaxed and submissive and obedient and dependable and happy with the work that you're doing. Now, this also bleeds over into what kind of halter to use. And they're selling these rope halters by the dozens that have knots in them, and they tell you this gives you leverage to pull on them and make them go where you want to go. But when you're practicing in that hourglass pattern, you won't need a rope halter. And when you go to do obstacles, as we have described in prior interviews, you may need to help the animal to balance off the end of the bridge to get those 2 front feet down and leave the 2 back feet up, and that will require you getting in front of them. And you need a halter that fits their face comfortably so that you can help them balance by grabbing the noseband of the halter. And those rope halters are loose. If you get it to fit in one spot, it doesn't fit in the other. And they're loose, and they have constant pressure from those knots on their face. However slight it seems to be to you, all you need to do is put your index finger under your ear and see how long you can leave it there without it starting to bother you. Now, those mesh halters will fit their face, and it's more like having the palm of your hand under your ear. And it doesn't have knots in it. It's got those connection buckles that also lay flush with the skin. And so it doesn't put pressure anywhere. But it will allow you to help them. And if they learn the cues that you are trying to give them with the halter rope, when you're carrying it in your left hand instead of your right hand, if you carry it in the right hand, then every time you take a step, you're moving their head and neck, and they balance with that. But you have to be aware of that and keep that rope loose over your belly in your left hand and just hanging off the halter, and then just point in the direction of travel. And when you're pointing where you're going, they're going to know where you're going, in what direction, and you can keep them from diving into your fanny pack full of oats by just having your hand there and blocking their head from doing that. When you walk in sync with their feet, then they're going to feel that rhythm with you, and you're going to be in the same rhythm as they are. And then when you want to stop, and you stop with your feet together, then they're going to know that you're not taking another step forward, but you're stopping because now you got your feet together. That's a sign to them, a prerequisite that, oh, we're going to stop now. Oh, she's putting her feet together, so I need to put my feet together and stop where I am. And then square up, putting equal weight over all 4 feet. There's a purpose for that. That's so that they can be relaxed and comfortable in their own good posture. Now, good posture, like we said, is not something that is not automatic. It's something that we need to teach. And in order to teach good posture, they're not like us, where your grandmother can put a book on your head and say, okay, now I want you to walk with this book on your head and don't let it fall. And that will put you in good posture. But they got 4 legs and a head that moves all over the place, so you can't exactly put a book on their head. But the elbow pull postural aid that I developed will work. A lot of people think that thing is a tie down, to tie their heads down and flex their neck and put them in good posture. But the good posture is not due to just arcing their neck. Now, to see a lot of these horse trainers doing this vertical flexion is what they call it, they're only doing vertical flexion in the head and neck, and they're not addressing the animal all the way from head to tail. But if you use this elbow pull thing that I developed, it will cause them to stretch their neck all the way across their back, because it won't let them raise their head so high that they can hollow their back and their neck. They are forced to stretch across the back. And you want to do it without the rider first for a prolonged length of time, so that you can develop those core muscles that are all the way around all those bones, in the head, in the neck, across the back, in the rib cage, under the abs, all the way down through all 4 legs. And the only thing that you have to concern yourself to get them to do that is to just stop them from raising their head so high that they hollow their back and their neck.
Right.
So when you adjust that elbow pull, and you have to attach it to something, so you have to have a light saddle or a light surcingle, so that you're not putting weight on their back from the beginning, because that's going to influence the development of the core muscle. You want it lightweight enough so that it's free moving, and it's going to be limited because of the position of the elbow pull. But what the elbow pull will allow is full range of motion in every other direction except putting their head so high that they hollow their back and their neck. They can put their nose to the ground. They can put their nose above the withers and still keep that arc in their neck and the arc in their back. They can move their head from side to side all the way around to touch their barrel. It doesn't inhibit their motion except to raise the head too high. And you're going to be asking them to do things in their groundwork that is going to require that they be able to do that. And when you look at all those other restraints that they have to help you, quote unquote, they've got tie downs for gymkhana, they've got martingales for pleasure classes to try to get them to lower their head and neck and everything. But there's several things wrong with that, because it restrains their range of motion so much that they are not allowed to move their bodies the way they might need to do some of the things we're asking them to do. And what's more, those things are in the rider's hands. So if the rider is not competent in their balanced seat with quiet hands, just holding the reins with a connection, not really pulling, but just with a connection, they can't do that, then the animal can't do their work. So people that attempt to train their own animals, they do manage to achieve a certain level of success despite the trials and tribulations of trial and error. However, this can be a long and frustrating road that leaves the long ears with unwanted bad habits, because it creates resistance. When you use this elbow pull, you don't have to worry about anything else but your own position while you're walking with them, while you're ground driving them, and while you're riding them. You can keep your own body very, very quiet when you're walking with them in the hourglass, for instance, and you're leading the way I described. You're not pulling on that animal at all. You're giving them body language to say which way we're going and when we're going to walk and when we're going to trot and when we're going to slow down, speed up, and when we're going to stop. And they can get that from you just simply by watching your body matching theirs. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
So that's what they do when you're leading them. Right. And then when you're matching them step by step, then your legs are moving with their front legs. And whether you realize it or not, you're learning the rhythm and the tempo and the cadence of the way they move. So you're teaching your body to move with their body while you're on the ground. And then when you start doing ground driving, you will no longer be in sync with the front legs, but you will learn how to be in sync with the back legs. And the back legs are what's going to come underneath your seat when you're riding. If you learn through ground driving how to stay in sync with those back legs, you're going to find that your seat bones are going to be moving with your legs as they're moving with their back legs. And then later, when you get into the saddle, you'll be better able to feel those hind legs coming underneath your seat and move with the animal. And with all these lessons, this is why it takes 2 years to do all this groundwork, because you're developing these in-sync movements with your animal and not just training them to do things. You're training yourself to move with your animal. And the animal, in turn, appreciates that you're learning to move with him. You know, what I've done a lot of books and videos, and they're available to everybody. So if you don't get the bits and pieces that I have posted on the website, you can get your own copy of my books and videos that have all of this in it. Although you're going to get a lot of it from the website, in the training tips, the bits and pieces that are in the manual, in text, but it's all put together in the books and videos in a logical and sequential way. So I published all of this, and it's all published in extreme detail. And those of us who were training need to rely on educational resources that were designed for horse training in the beginning, and I needed to modify those techniques so they would suit our long ears. And it still leaves a lot of room for trial and error because all these animals are so unique and so different, just like we are. If you can follow these and these instructions that I've given you and be patient, slow down, take these things in a logical and sequential order, then you can eliminate a lot of the frustration between you and your long ears. Long ears are getting real popular these days, too. So there's an increased number of long ears. There's an increased preference for them.
Sure.
Most trainers are used to dealing with horses, and they're finding it very difficult to keep up with long ears. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's also preferable that the long ears owner be the trainer. You know, it's advisable if you do training sessions with a coach or with a trainer that you're always there as the owner so that you can monitor and keep the training integrity as close to the same with the animal as from trainer to owner. So owners, trainers, and animal all need to be in sync all the time, routinely, consistently. And you can't just change it up. And if you have to travel long distances to see your animal in training, I'd say keep them home and have the trainer just come to your place and coach you. Because if you've got the right kinds of tack and equipment, and if you have the other tools necessary, if you have your facility set up with fences that the animal can't chew on, then you don't have to worry about vices. If you feed regularly, they're not going to get anxious about feeding. You just nip these things in the bud before they happen. And talking about bridles, for instance, if you train your animal, one of the most common problems when training an animal is that you want to start them in a snaffle bit with direct rein action from the corners of the lips. And no shanks, even a short shank, is not going to have the same action as a snaffle bit. But a lot of people will go to a twisted snaffle bit to get the leverage that you want. All those things are going to do is aggravate the corners of the mouth and the top of the tongue, and your animal is going to start flipping that tongue around for sure with a twisted wire.
You bet. This is where trainers call that softening the mouth, and that's not the way to do it.
You're absolutely right, and that's an incorrect assessment of what that is.
Yes.
Because if you put something like a twisted wire on skin, what do you think it's going to do? Do you think it's going to soften the mouth?
Right.
Or do you think if you use common sense, it's going to create calluses?
Yes, right.
It's going to sore up the mouth, and then the mouth will build calluses, and then there goes your animal's attention to light cues.
Yes.
So a lot of this requires a lot of thinking and processing. The other thing that you can do for yourself is build a rain board. And one of those rain boards, I had to do this for myself for driving because the lines were so long, and I couldn't really feel the corners of the animal's mouth with that distance on the lines. What you do is you just take the lines and build a board that it will stand up and put holes through it that the reins can go through, and put weights on the other side of the reins so that when you're standing on the other side of the board, you can put those reins in your hands, or those lines in your hands, and learn how to move those lines ever so slightly, just enough to move the weights up and down, but not very much. And that will help you to learn how to be very light in your hands and only give your animal cues that will just touch the corners of their lips to indicate direction, or to touch both sides of the lips and then release for a whoa, and then follow the action alternately when you're backing up, just enough pressure on one rein and then let go, and then on the other rein and then let go to get them to back. And when you practice yourself and try to be light in your hands, then you will get the right reaction from your animal, who is tacked up in his elbow pull, so he cannot raise his head so much that it hollows his back and his neck and gives him the motivation to run off. Then you won't have anything to fight with. He may stand there and stand still for a moment and go, what's she doing? She's tickling the corners of my mouth. What does she want me to do? But he won't raise his head and run off. He'll sit there and try to figure out, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
And if you've got the patience, then you don't need to get mad, because you don't have anything to get mad about. These animals are living creatures, and they're not like cars that can be tuned up and stay that way, only to be tuned up again.
Right.
It's really important to develop that line of communication. And it comes through the way you talk, the way you move with your body language, like we've talked about. It comes from just giving him hints. Now, seminars and clinics can be helpful, but you have to realize they can never replace the day-to-day routine that helps the long ears to learn to trust you and trust the situation with minimal anxiety. But if he knows that you're going to wait and you're going to keep doing what you're doing until he figures it out, then he can be patient too. And this limits his ability to become a safe and obedient and dependable animal when you try to go too fast and you're creating anxiety. Mules and donkeys bond deeply to those who manage and train them. They develop warmth and affection for them, a strong desire to please and serve, because that is the only thing that really bothers them at all. They want to serve you. They want to please you. It's just like any young child. Kids don't automatically say to themselves, I'm going to be bad, and then do something bad. They really honestly think that what they're doing is something you're going to like.
Yeah.
It's like the little kid on the commercial that is at the dinner table and has learned to become a magician. And once they yank the tablecloth out from underneath the dishes, he thinks it's going to work. He thinks you're going to be dumbstruck with his ability until all the dishes fall on the floor. You know? But if you see that he's going to try to do that, then it's up to you to say, no, don't do that yet. You have some things to learn first. So a lot of times when you have a shallow bond with your animal, it seems like you've got a deep bond. But without true commitment to their work, and then they're not going to know that either. So you got to catch your animals before they do something bad and stop it before it happens.
Right.
And that requires a lot of thought on your part and a lot of patience. When the pressure is on, the animal's response, if they're being forced and overwhelmed, they're either going to run off or they're going to quit.
Yeah.
So learn to enjoy, as we said, the pleasure of training your own animal and all the different things that he's going to make you aware of, and engage in negotiation on those things, and learn to enjoy it, because it's going to make you be more creative in your thinking and your approach. And you might find that, yes, in fact, you don't need to pull on those reins. You don't need to pull on that lead rope. You don't need the leverage that people are telling you that you have to have.
Right.
We talk about being a leader, horse trainers do. And being a good leader doesn't mean do it by force. Mm-hmm. I learned, for instance, how I could have a better impression on my employees if I modified my approach and took into consideration the responsibility of treating them with respect, being clear in my intentions, and breaking things down into little steps that I knew people could learn easily. And that's exactly what I had to do with the mules and donkeys. Even if your mule or donkey is with a competent trainer, you need to spend on at least 2 days a week with him and the trainer.
Oh, yeah.
So your long ears can learn to trust you too. And it may just be that the trainer might have some things he can learn from you too. Because everybody has something to contribute of value. And it doesn't serve any purpose to send your animal to a trainer and just write him off as the expert and, oh, I don't know anything. What that will do is erode your own confidence. And when your animal comes home from the trainer, if you haven't spent time communicating with the trainer and with your animal, then you're not going to be confident, and you're going to end up passing that attitude on to your equine, which will pass on the attitude of distrust. He won't trust you because you don't trust yourself.
Right.
And this is really important. The most important thing is building the trust between the two of you. People ask me why I quit taking outside long ears in training here at the ranch. In all honesty, I had developed a waiting list that I couldn't possibly fulfill in a reasonable amount of time for reasonable cost. Because I do believe in taking time with the animals, and I won't turn them over in 30, 60, 90 days like people were demanding that I do. I decided it would be more beneficial to teach people how to train their own animals. I could get them past the fearful stage, but I'd rather that they do that and just take it slower, because I can speed it up with an animal because I know all of these little gimmicks and things that trainers know to make them accept me and let me ride them and do certain things. And that's okay if all I have to do is get a person past their fear. And generally speaking, you can't get a person past that fear any faster than you can get the animals past the fear of what they're going to have to do if they're going to get overwhelmed by the things they're being asked to do. All I have to do is get the person to see me ride the animal, and then they can know that the animal will eventually accept them, but they will be relieved to know that if they train their own animal, that they can spend 3 to 6 months on leading training in the hourglass pattern, and 3 to 6 months on top of that, leading in the hourglass pattern to reinforce it and to add obstacles for coordination. Then add another 3 to 6 months learning body language in the round pen, and then another 3 to 6 months in the round pen, and then going to the open arena on the drive lines. That tells the person who is fearful of the riding, oh, I don't need to be afraid of the riding part because it won't come for a long time. But there's a whole lot of other stuff I can do in between. And by the time I get good at all of that, then my animal will be used to me. I'll be used to the animal. I can get on and use everything I've learned in that 2 years. And my animal will be broke. Because they will be.
Right.
I can tell you, they will be. With all the books and the videos that I've produced, it took a long time to do those things. But I still had 32 animals out there. 7 of them were showing in shows. And then I had a bunch of youngsters that I had to bring along and do all the groundwork with. And I was satisfied with that because I learned about group lessons. Once I taught them all how to walk in the hourglass pattern, how to negotiate the obstacles, how to be in the round pen and learn body language, and then how to learn to be on the drive lines. After I taught each one of them those things, then I figured out that I could do group lessons because they all knew the same thing.
Yeah.
So then I could lunge 12 of them together, and it took less time than lunging one at a time, for instance. And it allowed me to do all the production of the videos and books and all of that kind of stuff. So then I brought in the children's series because I had time to do it. And I could take 5, 6 animals out into the arena for the obstacles and tie 4 or 5 of them along the rail while I was working them one at a time through the hourglass pattern and over obstacles, and that took a whole lot less time. And then, like I said, I could put them in the round pen, lunge them all at once, and then I could tie them on the fence and do ground driving the same way, and did that until my 2 and 3-year-olds were this is embarrassing, until they were 7 and 8 years old. And then I realized I hadn't ridden any of them.
Right.
And I had quite a few of those. I had probably 10 of them. So I thought, well, I guess it's about time I start doing the riding training. But I was ground driving them in the hourglass pattern. You know, I had led them through the hourglass pattern. They had gone through the obstacles. They had lunged together and everything. I went ahead and I thought, okay, well, let's just get on in the round pen where we're confined, and we'll see what happens when I get on. What happened when I got on was the same thing that happened when I took them from the hourglass pattern to the round pen. They learned to walk, trot, canter, reverse, back, and I was on their back, and since they knew everything that I had taught them in the ground driving, they knew the ring cues, they knew that the body language, they knew the verbal cues, and all I had to do was add the leg cues. So when I pulled right, like I did when I was ground driving, I just put pressure on the left, let them know the leg was there, and since I had done imprinting, it didn't bother them at all to have more pressure on their body because I already touched them all over their bodies and put pressure here, there, and everywhere. So that didn't bother them. And what I discovered was that even after ignoring them all that time and allowing them to get to be 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, they were all broke. And they were all broke better than the animals that I saw in the green classes and the senior classes at the shows that were trained by people that didn't take their time with their animals.
Wow, now that's neat. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It was absolutely remarkable to me. When I went in and did those guys for a week like that, by the end of the week I was telling my crew, I can't believe this. I can ride them all. Next week I think I'll take them out in the hayfield.
All right.
And I thought, back to next week, no, that's not exactly the next step. The next step is to ride them in the open arena in the hourglass pattern, and then the week after that, I can take them in the open hayfield.
Yep, there you go.
It worked, and that's how I got all my animals broke, and it was so easy. And so I developed this logical and sequential training series, training mules and donkeys, so that anybody will be able to employ it with little or no prior experience at all. Because every step that you take is not going to be overwhelming for you or your animal. If you have any questions about anything and can't seem to find the answer, I'm available to everybody, and I answer every email and every letter and every phone call within 24 hours, so that I can give these people the answers that they need. And so people who never before had the courage or the confidence to even try are now discovering the self-satisfaction and the elation that follows when you attempt to train your own long ears.
Yeah.
You're not defeating yourself right from the beginning, and that fear is subsiding and it's replaced with curiosity. What more can I do with him? What more? And with things laid out the way I've got it in the books and videos, I can tell you what comes next. And you can see what comes next. And if you want it right at your fingertips and you don't want to have to go to the computer to look up the training tips, the under training, and then figure out which order they go in or whatever, you can buy the books and videos then. But until then, you can see what's in them on my website, and you can research it. You can look at it all and see what it's supposed to look like when you do all these things. Because there are videos, and you can read text, but a lot of times you get kind of lost in text when you think you understand it,
Right.
but you don't see it till you see it,
Right.
or you don't know it till you see it. People are really quite surprised to find out how easy it is to establish a routine that fits with your other weekly activities. You may make mistakes, but thanks to the intelligence and forgiveness of these wonderful long ears, you don't have to worry about making mistakes, and you've got all the resources you need at your fingertips to check yourself and go, oh, well, it's not acting the way I thought he was going to act at this particular lesson. What do I need to do? And then you go back and you look at it, and then you go, oh, I see what I did. I moved too fast through this, or I went too slow through that. Because they can get bored, too, if you start repeating too often with the idea of drilling it into them. They don't take kindly to drilling any more than we do.
Right.
That just gets tiring, and then you get bored, and then here comes the resistance.
Yep.
First the anxiety, then the resistance. I had been involved with training horses most of my natural life before I began training mules at my mother's Windy Valley Ranch in Healdsburg, California in the early 70s. I trained there for 6 years before I moved to Colorado to start my own mule farm. I knew that having 1,000 head was too much. We had brood mares, we had jacks, we produced 30 foals a year, and that was a lot of work. But then they were in the business of selling them.
Right.
And so that was a whole different focus. I was more into the business of learning all I could to make training easy, because I saw how many people were left out of being able to get their long ears to behave correctly. In a lot of cases, they would get an animal that was supposedly broke, and then because they didn't know the right things to do, over time, the animal would learn to run away with them or knock them down while they were grooming and stuff like that. And then here comes the fear and then the distaste for mules, and didn't want anything to do with them, and they just gave up. I have tried to make this give-up proof. I want anybody to be able to train their own animal if they so desire, and I want them to be able to experience the little victories along the way that keeps you going instead of all that anxiety and resistance and bad behaviors that will make you just want to quit. I want people to get excited about what they can do with their animals, and more than ever, I want them to get excited about the fact that they did it. They did it with their animals. They didn't have to go to a trainer, that these people could actually do it themselves. And what you get from that is a whole lot of self-esteem and very little depression. So I find it very beneficial after going through this whole process. If life starts getting me down, the first place I go is to the barn.
You bet.
Because I know that the interaction with my animals is going to be positive, because I've taught myself and my animals that it was going to be by changing myself and the way I was doing things, and thus getting the positive reactions from them. You have to think about it that way, because these animals never do anything wrong. They are always reacting honestly to what we're doing. So if your animal's misbehaving when you do things with it, it's your fault, not theirs. A lot of people like to place blame.
Right.
But that isn't what it's all about. It's all about how can I be the best person possible with my animal, and how can I explain it to them in the least negative way that I can to get the right result. And that is a result of thinking things through, being patient, and thinking about, okay, if I do this, what are they going to do? If I was a precocious child, how would I undo what they did? Because that's what the animal will do. If you put a wire fence up, for instance, with no top wire or top board on it, they're going to sit on it, then they're going to step over it.
Right.
And this is the way you need to teach yourself to think. What are they going to do? If I do this, what are they going to do?
Right.
If they're a precocious child and they want to be free, what are they going to do? And I want them to be free to express themselves, so I don't get mad about all the noise they cause. And I let them express themselves, both with their voice. And if they're nudging me, mine don't push me anymore and knock me over. They come up to my shoulder, and they vibrate their upper lip on my shoulder. So I would say that's the equivalent to a tap on the shoulder. Hey, Mom, I'm trying to get your attention here.
Right.
And you will learn that that's the way they talk. And if you don't get mad about it and slap them and get them out of the way, then you're going to start communicating.
There you go.
And I discovered that they were the ones that let me know when my approach to training was unrealistic and punitive. And they did it when I was really careful and respectful and all that. They were also all-knowing and corrected me in a very careful way. My lessons with them were proportionate to my mistakes, so I was lucky enough not to experience any severe head injuries or broken bones.
Ah, yeah.
When these kinds of injuries occur, there's something grossly wrong between the animal and the person that's been injured. Could be a lot of reasons, but the one thing I can be sure of is that the long-ears, and even horses, always acted honestly and appropriately. They cannot be any other way. The problems occurred because of my own lack of communication. I wasn't listening to what they were trying to tell me. When we raise our children, we should begin with nurturing love, affection, and play. The way we play outlines certain behavioral limits for our children and helps them to understand boundaries, and there has to be boundaries. You cannot let a child raise themselves, or you're going to have a hellion on your hands.
Yeah.
With no boundaries, you're also leaving no boundaries to anxiety, to violence, and all these other things. And when you set boundaries, the animal or the kid learns to socialize in a positive and healthy manner. As the child grows, family interaction helps him to define his place in the world, and this is present when you bring other people around your animals. This is why it's not advisable to let anyone else ride your animal unless you're supervising. Appropriate physical activities helps the child's body to develop in a slow and healthy way, and that's just paying attention to your animal's physical development so that he isn't a wild man and he can do things in a more controlled way because he can control his body. School in its natural and logical order helps a child to react appropriately in society and in the world. This helps to develop self-confidence on which self-image and self-worth is built. Physical activities increase with intensity over a long period of time, and yet we expect our long-hairs to be trained in a couple of years? How can we even expect them to develop in a healthy way, both physically and mentally, and learn so much in so little time? At first, you might think there isn't enough time to spend with your long hairs to accomplish all this training, but I assure you, you have more time than you think. Just be realistic with your expectations at each stage of growth and training without the pressure of being hurried. We all need to slow down, stop, and smell the roses to enjoy the little victories along the way with our long hairs. Long hairs can afford you some very special memories if you only let them. Some days are for learning, and other times it's just plain fun and games. And one of these days you'll find yourself saying, I can't believe he turned out to be so good. I never really felt like I was really training him. And I might mention at this stage, too, that all of these different things that I've outlined, I learned with rock and roll, the 2 draft mules that were just horrendously damaged in their bodies, that starting with the physical development of the bodies and getting them to move correctly had enormous gains, which also it developed their mental attitudes amazingly. And I had so many animals in training when I started with those 2 that I really hesitated to take them on in the first place. And my first thought was to go ahead and do them individually, just like I did the other animals, only to find later, about the same time that I found out that I could lunge multiple animals together and greatly reduce the training time, I also discovered at the same time that I did not need to ride or lunge or do anything like that more than once a week for 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah, now that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, when you do core strength training, you can do that.
Right.
When you're only developing bulk muscle like you do when you're riding for 2 hours at a time and doing it every day and drilling,
yeah,
all that does is fatigue the muscles, fatigue the animal, and all you're building up is bulk muscle over the top of a weak core. And they need the elements of everything in their life in order to be healthy mentally and physically. And in order to integrate all those things in their life, you need to slow down. You need to have patience, and you need to take very small steps towards little gains and not the ultimate gain. Don't even think about the ultimate gain. I tell people, when you're doing this kind of training, don't even think about when I'm going to ride.
right.
Don't even think about it. Be in the moment. Like I said at the beginning with the animals, they do things in the moment. And if you can go ahead and make the most of every moment, that sequence of all those moments, like I told you, will result in a broke animal, and you won't even realize how you got there.
I'm loving it. This is great. So this encourages more mule owners to work with their own mules and gain confidence. So
I think it is, and what it does for your own attitude, too.
right.
You will be far more peaceful in the things you do away from your animal.
Yeah.
Your kids won't drive you crazy as badly because you'll know how to deal with them, and you'll know how to pick your battles. Direct and guide your children if they're really annoying you.
Oh, boy.
And your husband, too. If he gets to be a little annoying, you'll know how to do that, too. You'll know how to ask for quiet time when you need it.
So you're saying that this works on husbands, too?
I've been told that. Years ago, actually, when I was at Bishop Mule Days, I was sitting at Bonnie's and my booth. This guy came up to me and he goes, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What do you want to know?" He goes, "Oh, no, I can't talk to you in front of all these people. Is there somewhere we can have some quiet time?" I said, "Yeah, we can go back out behind this building." And so we walked out there, and he goes, "Meredith, I want you to know how phenomenal your training series really is." And I said, "Well, I know it works on mules and donkeys very well." And he said, "No, that's not what I mean." He said, "Before, I was going out to be with my animals to get away from my family." And he says, "Since I've been training how you taught me," he says, "I was even thinking about divorce." He said, "You saved my family from divorce. And my family is all getting along so much better because of what we learned from your books and videos."
Wow.
That's huge.
That is huge.
And since then, other people have told me the same kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It becomes your whole life, and it certainly has become mine. I couldn't do everything that I do and then adding podcasts to it on top of my schedule, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, I've completed a lot of books and videos and dealt with production companies and all of that. But even with the production companies, they were very frustrating because they wanted to do everything their way.
Right.
And then they wanted to charge you an arm and a leg to do it.
Yeah.
And I got the idea that maybe it didn't have to cost as much.
Right.
You know.
That's a good way.
So in 2017, I didn't feel like I had to be on TV anymore.
Right. Yeah.
That was all a driving force too. I thought, oh yeah, I got to get famous. I got to be on TV. Got to do this. Got to do that. And then I realized that I was just listening to a bunch of people that wanted to use me for this and use me for that, and weren't exactly using the rules of common sense.
Yeah.
And they were creating a lot of anxiety in my life that I really didn't want. So after being on RFD TV for 11 years, I finally quit.
Yeah.
And told Patrick Gotch, no, I'm not coming back to RFD. I think I'll just try to do what I want to do, what I think will work better, and just reach the people and encourage them to train their own animals. Then I had a lot of people that identified as handholders. They really want you to hold their hand and show them what to do and all of that. And these people were coming on my property and bringing their animals over and trying to put them in training with me and then not showing up. And then I would send the animal home. It would perform for me. It wouldn't perform for them. And all of these little problems arose because of the way that I was handling all this stuff. And then the insurance companies decided they were going to raise the rates if you had people under instruction and boarded animals on your property and all of that. And I went, oh my God, this is getting nothing but expensive.
Right.
I thought, well, if I give all this information available to these people, I've done the books and videos, but if I can put all this stuff on my website the way I was doing it on TV, so people can still get to it, just have it there for them and everything, then I can coach them remotely. I can give them access to me, so if they don't get something, they can call me or write to me or whatever, and I can explain it to them, and then they can go on and they can get the information immediately rather than waiting for the next article or waiting for the next video or waiting for the next TV show or waiting for the next week's lesson or anything like that. They can actually move at their own speed. So I thought, thinking about this the way I'm thinking about this has nothing but benefit on both sides.
Oh, yeah. Right.
They're going to save money by not having to hire a trainer at these exorbitant amounts, and it's only gone up. I kept the prices on my books and videos down as far as I could take them.
Oh, sure.
And it's below cost, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But ever since I fired all these people in 2017 and decided that me and my crew are just going to handle the day-to-day business of what we've outlined here, it has been remarkable.
Oh, yeah.
I am so much calmer. I am not stressed. The people I'm talking to are telling me that their lives are getting less stressed, too.
There you go.
And the animals are performing better, and they're happy, too.
So, are you hungry? Surely you
Yes. Oh, yes. Finally hungry yet again.
Okay.
Although I'll tell you what, Christmas I think I gained 5-10 pounds.
Well,
Now I got to take it all off.
well, you know what to do, so.
I do know what to do. Eat less and walk more and take a walk with the animals now and again.
Right.
And now that they're older, they're not showing, they're not performance animals anymore. They're all over 30 years old.
Yeah.
And they just, if I do ride them, they just enjoy a nice casual, peaceful ride around the
Sure.
ranch. We've got 132 acres here. We can go riding anywhere, anytime. So
Boy.
it's all kind of laid back and very enjoyable.
Awesome.
And now that I don't feel the pressure of training like I did before, it's reached a natural, relaxing end to that kind of pressure.
Good.
The pressure is off. It's
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, that means we're going to do lunch, and you have a great rest of your day, and we will talk soon.
Sounds great, Cindy.
Meredith's website is lucky3ranch.com, and you can call her at 1-800-816-7566. And I can be reached through my website, everycowgirlsdream.com.
Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.
Mule Talk is an Every Cowgirl's Dream production.